Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Attention Engineer. I'm Laura Kidd, producer, songwriter and solo artist making music as Penfriend. Find me around the internet at Penfriend Rocks. In this noisy world, the gift of someone's attention is priceless, so thank you for joining me today. As a solo artist working mostly alone, even in so-called normal times, I've rarely had a chance for the deep conversations I've always hoped for with the artists I admire the most, so this podcast is my attempt to connect, learn and share. Attention Engineer is supported by Arts Council England and the National Lottery, and powered by the Correspondence Club. I'll tell you more about that later on. Hello to you and thank you for tuning in this week. Wherever you are in the world and whatever you're doing, I hope you're doing well. As always, I'm beaming into your ears today from my home studio, the Launchpad in Bristol. Since I last spoke to you, I've been working on a musical collaboration project and lining up the next batch of songs for my new album. I've been getting really into using the Kanban method of organisation via an app called Trello, and I've been watching a lot of Thomas Frank videos on YouTube. If you're someone with a lot of plans, dreams and schemes, I highly recommend both. When I decided to start this podcast series, I didn't think too far beyond just that, getting it started. I'd been making lists upon lists of interesting artists in my notebook, and once I decided on my angle and written up my base questions, I started tentatively contacting people. Before episodes were published, the whole thing was just an idea in my head really, so I'm especially thankful to my first 11 guests for their trust and their belief that I was going to do something good with the recordings I was making. Now the series is an actual thing, and I've got into the rhythm of getting a new episode ready every week, and I'm starting to run low on my stock of recorded conversations, I've been sending invitations out to more dream guests, and I'm delighted to report that I have 5 exciting conversations to record in the coming weeks. Hooray! And phew! Massive thanks to everyone who's been kind enough to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You're not only helping Attention Engineer's chances of being featured high in the music section, which is really, really helpful, but you're making it look good to potential future guests, which I really appreciate. I really am just getting started here, and I really am making this all on my own, so every little thing you do helps. Thank you so much. On Sunday, I received the tremendously exciting and very invigorating news that Attention Engineer was featured in the Observer New Review in actual print, with some very kind words written by Miranda Sawyer. I do not take these things for granted, and if you've come along to check out the podcast today because of reading about it in the newspaper, thanks very much to you too. Now, on with the show. Kate Harkin has been touring since her teens and is one of the most prolific collaborators of her generation. In addition to her own band Larkin, formed as a teen, she's been a touring member of Sleater-Kinney, Wild Beasts, Flock of Dimes and Kurt Vile and Courtney Barnett, and has performed backing vocals for Dua Lipa on Saturday Night Live. Harkin also duetted with comedian Sarah Silverman on Tiny Changes, a celebration of Frightened Rabbit's The Midnight Organ Fight. Her studio work includes contributions to Waxahachie's Out in the Storm, and outside of the music world, Harkin has composed for Turner Prize-winning artist Helen Martin and British comedian Josie Long. She even has a Saturday Night Live sketch named after her, Fred Armisen's 2016 Harkin Brothers Band. That is so cool. Solo album Harkin was released in April 2020 on Hand Mirror, the label that Harkin and her partner, the poet and live arts organiser Kate Leah Hewett, founded in 2019. This conversation took place on Friday the 3rd of April 2020, which was at the end of the second week of the UK coronavirus lockdown. Well, thank you for joining me today, Katie Harkin.
Thank you for having me.
What's going on with you at the moment?
What's going on with me is what's going on with everybody else in the entire world at the moment.
Yeah. Do you find that a strange concept? Because that's one of the things that's blowing my mind the most, is that everyone's going through this. And that is unusual, to say the least.
Yeah. It's happening at a time when we're also uniquely connected to one another, you know, which people in 1918 didn't have the luxury of doing so.
Yeah, exactly. It's been really interesting. I think it's, well, my husband and I were talking about, like, during the plague, how did people connect with each other? you know?
Yeah, funny you should say that, because I used to live in the Peak District. I lived there for about 3 years when I was working on this record, actually. And I used to live near Eyam, which you may or may not know is famous for being a plague village, because they received a box of cloth from London with fleas from plague rats on. They got the plague and they self-isolated, because at that point they realised it was something was happening that could be transmitted. So they self-isolated and saved a huge number of people in the north of England from getting the plague. And this is a village that, you know, I was due to be getting married near. We don't know. We'll see what happens. But it's a story that I've been thinking about constantly, because there were all sorts of stories that came out from the lives of the villagers who were there, because a great number of them died, but also some of them did survive, and people brought them food and left money in wells at the edge of the village, and lovers that were separated would sing to each other over the moors. So that's something I've been thinking of a lot. You know, I've been able to kind of, you know, WhatsApp my friends around the world, just thinking of the people whose the only option was to stand at the other side of a field and sing as loud as you could.
That's beautiful, though.
Yeah, it's been providing a lot of perspective.
Yeah, it's a unique time. There's lots of words being overused. Unique, unprecedented. Mm-hmm. I think putting a disclaimer in front of everything, it's needed, because I know this podcast doesn't matter because people are in hospital. Mm-hmm. But equally, artists create things, don't they? And we're all trying to find ways to get through the day, whether we're in a privileged bubble or not, I think. Yeah, absolutely. And was it Gareth Southgate that had the statement about, you know, it's not the time for any of us to take centre stage right now. The people centre stage are those on the front lines of caring. And should always be in the back of our minds. Of course. And it's been really nice that we've started adopting the 8 p.m. applause for the NHS on Thursdays in the UK. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I've got a friend who's been living in Paris. She just moved there just before this started happening.
Wow.
Of course, Paris has been on lockdown for longer than us, and they do it every night. I think that's better. I don't know why we wouldn't do it every night.
Yeah.
We tried it here, but, you know, the first one was last week. So my husband and I went out on Friday as well. And we're just like, we're doing it. We're going to do it every night. And it really didn't catch on. But every week is good.
I asked my mum how they were doing, and she said they had vuvuzelas on their street. So it's good, you know, the amount of stuff that's being dusted off, the amount of spring cleaning people must be doing.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's nice to see some people that aren't the people in my house, the one person in my house.
Yeah, it was nice to wave at everyone.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a giving thing. Like I'm not thinking about myself when I'm doing that applause, but it is really, really nice to see some other people.
Yeah.
So it's one of those connection things.
Yeah.
But so with that disclaimer in mind, I'd love to talk to you about what you do musically.
Sure. Again, it feels, you know, self-promotion always feels strange as it is.
Yeah.
And I've come, you know, we've all had a lot of time to sit around and think, those that are, you know, lucky enough to have free time at the moment and be well.
Yeah.
And it's led me to think about, you know, why I got into music in the first place, and it was for that feeling of connection and looking for that and searching for that. So it feels, I mean, it always feels icky to sell the art that you make, but looking at it now as a framework for finding connection. And, you know, I found you. And
Hi.
whoever's listening right now, and, you know, the cat that's stretching in a chair next to me, I wouldn't be living with her if it wasn't for this situation right now. So yeah, it's all about finding connection.
Yeah. And so you have a solo record coming out soon, don't you? This month?
Yeah, it's apparently so. Yeah.
I know everything seems to have sort of stopped. Again, from this position of privilege, I was talking to someone else about it being kind of like a global pause, but it's only a global pause if you're able to pause. You know, we've got broadband and roofs over our heads.
Yeah, it's not a pause in the hospitals right now. It's, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't ignore it. I mean, I broke my foot, like 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. I broke my foot and I made a big fuss about it because it was very painful. And then I started thinking, I shouldn't be indulging any of this because some people don't have legs. And then I talked to someone about it and they're like, yes, but yours still hurts though. Mm-hmm. It's okay to accept that you're in pain and life is more difficult than it was before. whilst also acknowledging that others have it worse than us.
Absolutely. And it is difficult to, it's not difficult to accept, but I think it sits strangely somewhat that the best thing that we can do right now is absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
You know, the absolute minimum is the best thing that we can do as organisms to protect our fellow organisms.
Mm. Yeah, and it's very counter to the life of a touring musician, isn't it?
Indeed.
So you were meant to be on tour right now, is that right?
I mean, I haven't even looked at what the last show should have been because it's just so irrelevant at this point. It was very strange it's been strange times for everybody, but it was strange to be experiencing this whilst on tour because, you know, there's already a feeling of disconnection from the world and from current events when the day-to-day of touring is so physically and mentally demanding that really, you know, staying in the moment is the way that I've been able to get through it and be able to, you know, enjoy it.
Yeah.
So then, you know, weighing up and calculating the risks of something that was unfolding. I was just wiping the cat hair away from the microphone. I don't know if that would have got picked up. Yeah, it was very strange to weigh up the gravity of a growing crisis when our governments weren't weighing it up either. But yeah, to be a person that was traveling and pushing for shows in Italy to be cancelled when no one was cancelling them for us and things like that, which, you know, within a week became, it's, you know, a ridiculous feeling that we even had a show in Italy that hadn't been cancelled for us, you know. So yeah, bizarre times for everyone.
I was talking to Frank Turner for this podcast a few weeks ago, and he was the last interview I did actually in person because he was going through the similar thing of feeling like shows should probably be cancelled, but because the government hadn't said anything about it and they hadn't closed down the venues, they hadn't closed down the bars and things, it was like all the musicians had to decide for themselves. And then of course they're letting down their staff, all of their crew and everything like that. That was a really weird bit of time, I think, where it was really unfair that musicians suddenly had to decide on the well-being. And then if they cancelled things, then some audience would be upset. And if they didn't cancel things, then the audience were also upset. So it's just a really confusing, conflicted time, I think.
It was very strange. My friend Mackenzie Torres has spoken about this, and she did an interview with Pitchfork about it, and, you know, had let me know because I quit the tour just a couple of hours before everything got cancelled, essentially, because I was travelling on my own, and as a person that's not an American citizen, was in a difficult position with, you know, my living situation. And, you know, we played the show in Berlin, and I'd explained to everyone, and they absolutely understood. But I still felt terrible because, you know, it's not a position anyone wants to be in. It was when the pandemic was declared that I decided to quit. I you know, felt strongly. And then within a few hours, you know, Donald Trump had made his declarations, and then Mackenzie began her journey to try and get home. But yeah, the timings were just wild. Yeah, it was sort of hour to hour things were changing. And as you know, this is only early April. Hour to hour things will continue to change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know. I was going to say it's big, and then I was like, don't say that. That's so loud. It's like saying something's really cool when you see a beautiful painting, isn't it? Oh, that's really cool. Like, okay, didn't need to say that.
Was it Terry Pratchett? Oh, I could be getting the author wrong. There's a science fiction author that would say we shouldn't use the word awesome because what will we say when the aliens come? You know, something that's truly awesome and truly, you know, something can be awesomely terrifying. So, you know, we can't blame ourselves for struggling to find the language to describe what's happening because this is unprecedented.
Yes. Unique and unprecedented times.
Yes.
Exactly. So in these unique and unprecedented times,
yes.
How do you feel about your choice to make music central to your life?
I feel like so much of the good in my life has come from music, and, you know, part of supporting individual musicians is also supporting our infrastructure. So looking at the places that were so inspirational to me, like the Brunel Social Club in Leeds was like a place I wanted to go to. Yes, because of the music that I would see there, but also because of the people that I would meet there. So music has been this thing that's opened the world to me in so many ways and made the world feel porous from a young age. You know, you listen to a song that describes a feeling you haven't really had yet and you still understand it. So it just continues to be, the driving force in my life.
I've been hearing about you for so many years now because I think, am I right in saying that you know the guys from Hope and Social in Leeds?
Yeah.
You do. So I think I heard Rich and Ed talking about you years and years and years ago. And then my friend Jay plays in Bright Light, and you played in Bright Light, right?
Yeah, I did.
And then I was like, and now she's playing with Sleater-Kinney. Whoa! It gives me a bit of hope because I'm just like, that's a person who I've heard of, who knows people I know, and she's doing amazing things. And so the first time I saw you on stage was at the Roundhouse playing in Sleater-Kinney. And it's like, yes, this is so cool. So cool.
That is such a wonderful compliment. I'm going to thank you for that wonderful compliment because it's not lost on me. You know, I went to see them when I was in high school on my own. And that is the kind of thing I mean by music makes the world porous. You know, it just does these incredible things that, you know, are truly, phrases like beyond my wildest dreams are brought into focus, where it's like, well, yes, because I could never have expected that to happen. That's not something that happens. But yes, I know Hope and Social because my old band Larkin, we did the demos for our second record. I don't know if they still use this place, but they had a studio in the crypt underneath a church.
I think they still have that.
Do they? Yeah. That's great. And it looks like the horror, like the church on a hill in a horror movie is what that church looks like in the best way possible. So the crypt is in the hill. So it's the sort of negative to the top of the church. So you've got the aisle down the middle, and then each of the arches, you know, you can stick a drum kit in one and a guitar amp in the other, and you've got this kind of natural separation to the room. And before it was a recording studio, it was a children's nursery, so it's covered in children's handprints all over the wall.
Forgot that bit. That's why it's so vividly colourful, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's got all that stuff.
So it's like a crypt covered in children's handprints, which is, you know, cheery and creepy in equal measure. And then, Bright Light is an artist that I've known for a long time, who's currently in New York, and I think of all my friends in New York right now. But he's just such a fantastic example of somebody who has been self-determined for the longest time and is also a wonderful advocate for his community, our community, the community of LGBTQ+. And he has self-released music for such a long time and has had, you know, collaborators like Elton John from, you know, all from his own efforts. And it's just a really inspirational human being all around, and absolutely someone to listen to right now, I'd say. He's just put out a new song that honours safe spaces for LGBTQ plus people, and it's got I've forgotten their names, which is awful. Sorry, Rod. Sorry to these ladies. Nikki and Donna, who were Madonna's backing vocalists in like the Vogue era. And onwards. So it's very good for dancing in your living room, which a lot of us are doing right now.
Yeah, I've always been really impressed with him. I saw him support Narina Palo.
Oh wow, yeah,
a long time ago.
Yeah,
and playing completely solo, and I play solo a lot myself, so I'm always going, oh yeah, I really like it when people just play on their own.
Yeah,
it's nice when there's a great band. And actually Hope and Social, my favourite real band.
Yeah,
so if anyone's listening who hasn't heard them, you're in for a massive treat. They're brilliant. And we did a cover song together once when they did this thing called Crypt Covers, which is why I went to the Crypt.
Oh right.
Yeah, and so I did one of those. It was really great. Yeah, we did a Madonna song.
Yeah, they're fantastic and very resourceful, even in the sunniest of times. So I expect they're doing all sorts of things. I think they've been doing some remote collaboration with each other already, which, you know, given it's like week 3 at this point, yeah.
They're just one of those bands that I think they're the only band really that put a massive smile on my face, because I like listening to really sad, weird stuff most of the time. So I'm not grinning when I'm listening to music, but they have such, I don't know, something about it. And yeah, they have just put up this video of them playing one of their songs all in their separate houses, and it's beautiful, of course. Made me smile a lot.
See, the Backstreet Boys do it in their mansions, but Hope and Social, they'll do it in, a living room you can recognise as a living room, not as a mega mansion.
I was really pleased that I didn't recognise who they were. Was it Backstreet Boys, did you say, that did that? Yeah, because someone posted it and I was like, who are these people?
Yeah, I did watch it. Again, no shade to the Backstreet Boys. I clicked on it, I watched it, I enjoyed it. But, equally it's difficult because for musicians, even if it's $1 for charity, it feels like mainstream musicians should be paywalling live performances, or at least sort of creating a culture of it, because it's really fantastic to have a lot of ways to entertain ourselves during this time, and ways to entertain families and kids and things, but equally the resources to do that are limited to those with means. And much like streaming, perhaps if there's a more accepted culture of paying for streamed performance, seeing as the touring industry is in total collapse right now, if we can push that as a culture from the start, and it needs to come from mainstream artists, unfortunately, then it will possibly protect an income source for the wider music community. If the culture is created and accepted and presented as the norm, if we can have pay-per-view wrestling,
Well, yeah, exactly. That's a really, really good point to make, actually, because my first reaction to anything, I suppose anything, again, this is unprecedented, so I haven't had a reaction to something so big before, but is always to just give something. So my first reaction was when loads of people are working from home now. I thought, okay, well, I've got all these instrumentals of 4 albums worth of stuff and an EP. So I thought I'd just put them on Bandcamp and people can have them to listen to while they're working. So they're not distracted by my voice, basically.
Lovely.
Yeah, and I feel really good about it, and I'm happy to do that. And then it gets to a point where I have to have a little bit of a panic every day about, well, where is this going? Because, again, some people are ill, some people have died, and people are working for the NHS like really long shifts and putting themselves in danger. I get all that. But also, I have to maintain the roof over my head, so I have to have a bit of a thought about my future too. And I have started worrying, like, well, how's that going to go? Will people be able to buy our records, the ones who currently choose to, streaming? I don't know, we could get into that. We may feel similarly, I don't know.
It's difficult. It pulls into focus the debate of what is useful and what are the skills that I have and how can I help and how is that helpful to people. And, as I say, it could well be if people wanted to do a concert that was $1 a pound per entry and on a system. If you're a key worker, it's free, click here instead. There's very small changes that we can make, but the difficulty is for artists, independent artists operating underneath a mainstream system. It's hard to lead the charge for that, and in a lot of ways, the lightning is out of the jar in terms of streaming culture. But this does highlight, the problem with revenue from streaming content.
Yeah, it does. So we were talking about the amazing Sleater-Kinney situation. How did that happen?
There's a short version, a long version. I suppose it's a podcast, so we could do the long version. Well, I was in a band that I started when I was 18, and Nesta, my bandmate, was 15, and I was in my first term of uni, called Larkin, and he came to visit because he was visiting London with his family, and he ended up staying in a hotel down the street from my halls. And there's a drum kit in the basement of my student halls, and we started a band. And I had goals for it that were get a 7-inch in Jumbo Records in Leeds and maybe play a gig in another country. And we ended up making 3 records with John Goodmanson in Seattle, Washington, because he'd made records with bands like Sleater-Kinney. At the time, the exchange rate was very favourable. It was 2-to-1. And looking at the budget we had, there's only 3 of us. We're like, well, we can go and fly an air mattress with us and sleep on the floor and record in America, which at that time was cheap. And it would be the same price as going to do this record in some tiny studio in London. And made friends with John. And then when after the last Larkin record, him and his wife invited me to come and stay with them. And before I had taken off, he sent me an email saying, I'm actually not going to be there for the first few days because I'm working on a record in Portland. And I replied and said, well, I'm a nerd. I love to be in the studio. Like, I could come down and make the coffee and assist you in any way I can. And he was like, well, I'll just check in with the band. And, it's the new secret Sleater-Kinney record, but don't tell anyone. And he knew that I'd met Janet and Carrie on tour when I was playing with Wild Beasts, and they were in Wild Flag, coincidentally. Wild bands. And I met Corinne for the first time, and within the first hour of meeting me, she'd bought me lunch and offered me a place to stay for the night. I was just going to sleep on the floor in John's hotel room. And I hung out with them, and then a few weeks later I got an email and a text that made me fall off my sofa when I was back in Leeds. So I haven't really pushed them. I don't really know. There wasn't an official interview or test or anything. But and it's been incredibly galvanizing to have people that I respected so much from afar put their trust in me.
Well, it's well placed because you're amazing on stage with them. It's such a great combination of people, I think.
It's been one of the great joys of my life, truly. Yeah,
that's awesome to hear.
They're just, it's such an honour. Such an honour. They're such incredible performers.
It's so nice when people who are heroes are also super nice, isn't it? It's such a relief. I find it a relief.
Yeah.
I met Corinne last year because I supported Filthy Friends.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
yes.
I did one show in London and I was, oh God, I walked backstage and she was there and I was just like, oh my God, it's her. And there are very few people in the world who would make me sort of stutter like that. And I just thought, I've got to say hi, otherwise it's going to look like I'm ungrateful and rude, but actually it wouldn't be that. It would just be that I'm super shy and freaking out about it. And then I didn't want to be too much. Of course, I just said, oh, hello, but I'm just going to leave you to it and whatever. And then I think we had a relatively normal conversation afterwards. I hope she would agree with that.
Lovely.
And she was great. So.
Well, it's interesting because it just shows you there's lots of different ways you can be inspired by people. And, as a musician, one of the things that was and is so exciting to me is getting to play with bands that I loved. And when Larkin started out, I would just assume that I would be, doing someone's job for them if I volunteered as a support band for almost any band that would come through. So I just sent, endless requests, and, the ones that stuck were, so exciting and fun. And that's actually something I'd recommend to any new artist, is that offer yourself as a support act to promoters at gigs coming up, that for bands that you like, because sometimes you're doing someone's job for them, and anytime you're doing someone's job for them, it's more likely to happen. So
100%. Yeah, it took me a while to realise that one, and then I noticed a local band in Bristol were doing that, and I thought, oh, that's how you get gigs. You don't just sit in your room and wait for a call.
Just be pestering them. That was I really, really pester people. But one of the first bands that that happened to us was with Broken Social Scene, and
wow.
They were a band that we all loved. We'd all got tickets, my band, before we got asked to do it at the Lead Mill in Sheffield, and I just remember talking. There's so many of them as well. I remember talking to a bunch of them that night, and then coming away and thinking there's lots of different ways to be inspired by people, I think I was just really inspired the way they'd organised something, or I can't remember what it was, but it was something very like domestic and ordinary, and I thought, oh, that's really cool. And it just shows, you can be inspired by someone's, life's work as a musician or overarching philosophy, or you can watch them coil up a cable a way you hadn't thought to before and think, oh yeah, that's really cool. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Well, it is, isn't it? Because there's no I was going to say that there's no school for music. Oh, wait, no, there is. I just didn't go to it.
Me neither.
There's a school for music. But there's no school for how do you be an independent touring artist? Because we're all so separate. Especially if you're a solo artist, as you are now. But even in bands, the bands are quite separate, and everyone's balancing, money coming in and then trying to do the band. And if the band becomes full time, you're trying to manage all of the elements of that, of course. And I don't think there's enough time really to say to someone, well, how do you do that thing? And how do you do that thing? There's no kind of coming together of that, which, I mean, some people are trying to do things like that. I know a few people who do. But for me, this podcast is kind of that thing. It's like, well, how do you do that thing? Because I do it this way, and we don't get to share that much.
That's something that I love about podcasts too. And, if you spend a lot of time traveling for your job, whatever it is, a lot of people drive for their jobs for lots of different reasons. Shout out if you're driving for your job right now. But as a touring musician, I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts, and it's anything that feels like it's demystifying a process which in some ways is like willfully I was gonna really shoot high and use a word that I actually don't know how to pronounce, but
you can start the sentence again if you like, and I'll make you sound great.
Obfuscating.
Obfuscating. You can do it. Go. I believe in you. Do it again. Do the sentence again.
Oh boy. I'm all right. I'm happy to leave it in. This is warts and all. This is, we're all operating on the best we can at the moment with everything that's going on. I tell you what, I do have to get up to let the cat out the room.
Okay.
What are you thinking?
That's allowed.
No, she doesn't want to get out. She just wants to lie on the floor.
Wanted some attention.
She's just moving around. But yes, anything that is knowledge sharing is a huge positive. And I've thought this also like across creative disciplines, because a couple of my best mates are filmmakers, and I met them through music videos, which is the sort of the center of the Venn diagram between musicians and filmmakers. And becoming close friends with them just makes me realize there's so many common threads in these industries that run parallel and sympathetically to one another in lots of ways, but very little kind of cross communication, and very, very separate worlds in a lot of ways. So that's been really revealing. Yeah, and another friend of mine that's a professional artist. Again, these worlds can be total bubbles, but you just realize, you swap. Insert name of power system here. Insert gatekeeper name here. The struggles are very similar, but they just have different names.
Yeah. I feel like it's about getting up in the morning and trying to make something at its core sometimes, which sounds very simple but can be very difficult. Yeah,
I think the simplest ambitions sometimes can be the most difficult. My ambition is to play music every day. It's really difficult. Most days I don't achieve it, but a lot of them I do,
Well, that's very good to hear. So on the subject of touring, how do you handle the highs and lows of that? Because that can be a challenge, I find.
Yeah, I handle it a lot better than I used to. I've definitely toured until, ending up in a ER or a casualty, like until my body has given up. I had to cancel some shows. Well, I didn't cancel as many as I probably should have done. At the end of 2017, I had a nasty nerve condition that I ended up in a ER in Seattle in the middle of tour with Courtney Barnett and Kurt Vile, and having to go to neurologists and get nerve blocker shots and all kinds of stuff that, again, don't tweet me with your diagnosis, but it's always my concern about discussing medical stuff in public. I don't want people to end up chatting at me, but it was essentially rooted in, being a person that was exhausted and probably should have gone home to bed and just gotten better, but didn't, and pushed it. So I think, I suppose in a lot of ways, sometimes you have to hit your limit until you realize you need to slow down. So yeah, taking care of my body physically on tour has become much more of a priority than it was in my 20s, but I feel like that's just what a lot of my friends say about their 20s in general. So that's definitely applicable to tour, because it's kind of an accelerated situation when you're traveling every day.
Yeah, and the physicality of playing and the any kind of loading that you're required to do.
Yeah, and just the no downtime, again, like rather than taking a week off work, it's not possible if you're already in the middle of Germany or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I did a lot of session playing probably more than 10 years ago, and I really enjoyed a lot of it. But I found the challenges very different from then when I started touring my own stuff. Because there's that thing of, doesn't matter how much you respect the person and love the music and what have you, but being with people who aren't your band, your chosen group for long periods of time, again and again, day after day after day, can be hard. But then I look at all the people you've played with and I just think, like, they're total dream jobs, like all these amazing albums and artists, and surely it's just one giant party, which also has its challenges if it really is one giant party. But I was just wondering how because you've gone from your band and then lots of other people's bands and collaborating and stuff, and then solo again. How's that journey feeling for you?
Well, I kind of feel it's similar to how I feel about the service industry, which is that everybody should have to work in the service industry, even if it's for a day, because you can tell when someone's never worked in a cafe or a restaurant, and they are horrible human beings to the people that are working there, which again, in this current crisis, the essential nature of those jobs has only been highlighted. But in a more frivolous comparison, I feel like every lead singer should go and play in someone's band or in a different position in a band. I think it's good for the ego, I think. And it's just so fulfilling to me in a way that I can't really explain.
Do you mean playing with other people's in other people's groups?
Yes, but like doing something for I guess it's doing something for somebody else who's provided you with such joy already, because playing in people's bands, I'm often trying to kind of do one thing that represents 3, 5, however many things that were going on a recording at the same time. So, I'm not a classically trained musician. You can put some music in front of me and, expect me to play it perfectly. But what I do really enjoy is, the kind of musical problem solving thing, which is, okay, so you made these 10 things happen with these 10 different pieces of equipment in this song, but we really want to be able to not have too much luggage at the airport and to fit on a stage and to not have to buy anything else. Like, what can one person do for this? We're not going to go and buy a Mellotron for this 10-second interlude. That kind of stuff is really fun. It's problem solving and, making... I like noises. I think that's the short answer, is just I really like making noises and working out how to make those noises happen in a way that is going to be fun to play and for people to watch, because ultimately we also have to remember we're performing this for other people. There's a lot of ways we could do things that wouldn't necessarily be as stimulating to watch, but yeah, we can work it out.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember you having a pretty massive pedal board at the Roundhouse. Is that right? Do you have a lot of cool stuff?
Yeah, which again, it comes from trying to be a lot of things at once. So, like on the current Sleater-Kinney setup, sometimes my my guitar sound is playing something that is actually ends up sounding like a synthesizer, and sometimes I'm using keyboards to make sounds that sound more organic. There's also the sort of physical limitation of, yes, okay, this bit was played on this on the record, but can I physically get there in time? And it's a great challenge.
Yeah, it sounds really fun. And that new record's great. So great. I love it.
Again, yeah, it was such a pleasure for me to be able to wander around in that. Like, that's really fun.
I feel like you need a sort of like a scientist lab coat in the corner of the stage, so you just put on and like, right, now it's my turn to make the noises.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate any
pair of goggles,
any kind of uniform. There's fewer decisions I need to make for packing. So
yeah, more pedals, fewer clothes. This was always my thing. I'd like to take a moment now to thank every single member of my monthly members club for helping to power the making of new music and this very podcast series. Thank you. I set up the Correspondence Club to offer fun member perks like zines, special t-shirts and badges, secret podcast episodes, and access to my warm and friendly online forum. New members get 2 free songs right away and access to the Clubhouse area of my website, which has a load of digital perks ready and waiting. I can even write you your own song. There are free and affordable paid tiers available starting at £2 a month, so have a look at penfriend.rocks/join. I have a present for you too. If you're interested in 2 free months of online learning, head to penfriend.rocks/skillshare to sign up and get access to high quality courses on all sorts of creative things, from illustration to video making to audio engineering to crochet. I only approach Skillshare because I genuinely love taking their courses myself. So if you want to learn some new skills, it's a great place to start. And just imagine what you could learn in those 2 free months. The link again is penfriend.rocks/Skillshare. Right then, let's get back to my conversation with Katie Harkin. How has the internet impacted your career? And what's your relationship with it at the moment?
Well, I've thought about this before, in that I could kind of trace the history of my music career through the rise and fall of different tech companies and applications. So I had a bass player that joined Larkin over MSN Messenger. We ended up playing a gig in Sweden before our first 7-inch came out because a promoter sent us a message on MySpace. I thought it was a hoax, but it turned out not to be. So yeah, from MSN Messenger to MySpace to then, and beyond. But and it continues, that there's sort of a lot of the significant milestones in my life that have happened to have been communicated through different mutations of the internet. For example, I've been very much enjoying a game on Apple Arcade called Mutazione because I love the soundtrack. And I, again, in my copious free time at the moment, DM'd the composer of this, and now we're emailing each other. And who knows, maybe I just have an Italian friend now. Maybe something would happen one day, but it's just really interesting to see how technology and creativity are inextricably linked these days,
Definitely. Sometimes I think about the online services that I have outlived.
MSN
like
Messenger, yeah, those
MSN,
kind of things.
MySpace.
Yeah.
I did crowdfunding for 3 of my albums through Pledge Music, which is now gone.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I suppose we have to roll with the punches, like whatever comes along. As an artist who wants to survive, we have to use the things, find out where the people are, use those things, and try and keep going.
Yeah, it's a good reminder not to locate too much of our stuff exclusively anywhere, also, in case such things get wiped out.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always surprised by how many musicians don't have a mailing list.
Oh yeah, I do have a mailing list. If you want to go to handmirror.online.
I'm very glad.
There you go. Handmirror.online is our label. Yeah.
Sign up. That's how we reach you now, without having to pay loads of money all the time.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And how do you feel about the internet on a personal level? Are you someone who uses your phone a lot or not a lot? Do you like that you use it? Do you not like it? How do you feel?
I think that I'm somebody who is wary of any orthodoxy. So I feel like I have like a healthy amount of skepticism, but equally I know that when the novel was introduced, people thought that it was this, terrible new invention that was far too fast paced and would be damaging to people. I know that when player pianos were introduced and people could have music in their homes for the first time, doctors were worried about the effect that it would have of, women being exposed to such things. So I know that as a society, we've always had, a kind of inbuilt Luddite impulse. So I don't necessarily buy the social media is destroying our souls as a baseline argument. I don't doubt that it's having a huge effect on us, but I think like anything, it's far too early to say. So I think a respectful distance to my own phone addiction is probably where I am. But equally, yeah, I'm always wary of anyone that like thinks that they've got all the answers.
Yeah.
As a know-it-all myself, it's a hard position to accept.
That's a really good way of putting it. But I know everything, so that person can't. Yeah.
Yeah,
like
exactly, because clearly I know everything. I don't know. It's hard to say. Like I can't deny that I'm as addicted to my phone as most of my peers seem to be. But equally, I live a life that is already geographically detached from a lot of the people that I love most in the world, and I do find it comforting to connect with them. So yeah, we'll see if the same people that were very proud about locking their phone in a drawer for however many hours a day are doing the same thing when they're...
Well, I'm one of those people, to be honest. And in recent weeks I've gone, well, maybe it doesn't have to be in the drawer now because I actually have a reason to use it a bit more. Well, I'm giving myself the reason.
It's not the fact that it's in a drawer, it's the kind of orthodoxy that I worry about. It's rules, man, It's interesting. It's definitely an interesting time. It's more like the people that would fall over themselves to tell you that they don't have a television.
Oh, yes.
It's like, that's fine, but it doesn't affect me, like, whatever. And also, I don't have a television.
Nor do
That's
I.
because who does? Yeah, exactly.
I was reading something recently. I can't attribute it because I can't remember who it was because I read it on the internet and not a lot of that stuff goes in my brain and stays, unfortunately. But I was reading that someone was saying that the kind of idea that you would say to someone that you're better than someone else because you read a lot, for instance, is really problematic.
Right.
And I do read a lot, but I don't think I'm better than anyone else because I read a lot of novels,
Yeah, I don't have a TV, but I don't think I'm better than anyone because I don't have a TV.
Exactly.
I would have a TV if I had somewhere to put it, Definitely. Absolutely 100% would have a TV. But it's not like it's not an ideological stance.
Yeah. And I suppose it's the intention that comes behind it. Like I'm wary of people spending too much time on the internet because I feel like there's a correlation in the rise of anxiety and depression and stuff that comes from it, and there's science to back that up. But it's not for me to say, it's not about shaming someone and go, you shouldn't do this or that.
No, and you know what doesn't help anybody is Puritanism,
No.
and I feel like there's a kind of like socially accepted technological Puritanism that is like transgenerational, and at some point in my childhood, it became like a trope that people didn't know how to program their VCRs, and that was just an okay thing to say, to be like, oh, I don't know how to work that. And then within every generation, there's like a kind of prototypical piece of technology that you get to a certain age and everyone agrees that, oh, no, Snapchat, that's not for me. That's and because you don't understand it, it's stupid. I don't know how to work that damn VCR, so it's stupid. Yeah. I don't know how to use Snapchat, so it's stupid. So yeah, I guess I'm just resisting my own, when I turn into a dinosaur and finally deem the newest piece of tech as stupid because I don't understand it, not because it actually is stupid.
Unfortunately, social media has a lot of people on it who don't understand something and want to tell everyone they're very angry about that fact, which I find interesting because I love not understanding things.
Interesting.
I love like listening to music and not getting it, or I love like reading something that I don't understand and going, well, there's something in that, you know, I don't need to be showing off my intellectual prowess and or lack of, or pretending I know more than I do. I prefer to be a curious person. In both of the meanings of those words, of that word, very curious person. So I think that's my approach to it. And just I think for me the whole like the internet stuff, I've built a career using it, and then have found that it wasn't really making me very happy for a while. And just I think it's about trying to find out what works for me. So even amongst all of this time, this unprecedented time when news is moving so quickly, I know that I have to protect my brain by not looking at too much stuff during the day.
Yeah.
Because I want to be informed, but I don't want to be on the floor depressed about it, because I actually can't help. If there's something I can do to help, I'll do the thing to help. But it's not helping anyone for me to just feel sad all day, I guess.
Totally. and you know, it's I suppose it's the same for anything else that has addicting properties. You know, moderation, everything in moderation.
Yeah.
Not everything, but you know what I mean.
Do you have any interests or life goals outside of your artistic career?
I do. I do.
Are there any that you'd like to share, or are they secret?
I mean, I don't know how many of them I want to share, because I think that's part of the fun of it, that if you have any if your job is public facing in any way, that it's fun to have some kind of goals that are just for you. But you know, like anyone at the moment, it's all become a very more collective kind of desire. You know, I want the kids to be able to play in the playgrounds again.
Yeah,
you know, like, and not just to be so altruistic, but that would make me happy. You know, it's thinking what is best for everybody is going to be best for you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm just pleased when musicians say that they do have other things, because I think makes people more interesting musicians, more interesting songwriters, to think about other stuff.
I also think that, you know, I've met people who were my age who grew up at a time when you could write 10 songs and they grew up watching people write 10 songs and then live off them for the rest of their lives, which is not the reality that we've grown into. But you know, that's not really what was if you weren't expected to be a woman in music, you weren't expecting to make a living off it, if that makes sense. So I think because the other side of the stigma that I did face was equally, I went in with fewer expectations than a lot of my peers, which partially is, you know, my own confidence being affected by, you know, the atmosphere that I was experiencing. But I also see that it has fostered a sort of DRI ethic that has been useful to me for long-term survival in the industry as it has unfolded and collapsed. So it's interesting to see how expectation versus reality is different for people in different demographics, shall we say.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point as well. I think I always assumed that no one would help me, so I just went for it, like
that's
without
what I'm
even
saying.
considering it.
Yeah.
But now I think maybe I should have considered trying to get some help, but then it's too late now because I've done it, so it's fine.
Yeah, I have been ranted at, by, okay, yes, it was a guy who thought he should be much more successful than he was by the age that he was. And I was like, oh, it's because you did grow up watching that happen. So you just thought it would happen to you.
endless role models.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, which again, which is why the role models that, we've talked about before, even more powerful. Because, there's a certain amount of seeing to being that has to happen.
Definitely. Yeah. Very interesting. I'm really glad we're doing this. Thank you for doing this. It's
Thank
good
you.
to talk
Me
about
too.
this stuff.
Me too. I hope I'm making some sense. I mean, like everybody else, I don't know anybody that's getting a good night's sleep at the moment.
No. Definitely not.
No.
Okay, I'm going to respect your time and not keep you for too much longer, but I'd love to know, who are your current favourite artists that we should be listening to?
I've been listening to the Helado Negro record a lot that came out last year. It's a really beautiful record, and it's also incredibly soothing. So it's been very good for current times. As I say, the game Mutazione, which is a very gentle story-based game, has a lovely soundtrack that I've also been enjoying. And then I saw that Yves Tumor or Tumor, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, has got a new record out today, and the last one was one of my favourite records of last year, so I'll be checking that out.
Brilliant. And you've got an album coming out too, haven't you? I don't know why I said that in such a creepy voice. And you.
I do, on the 24th of April. Yeah.
How do you feel about that in these times?
I think everybody's grasp of time has warped. People talked about March being the longest year they've ever experienced. And then this record is something that I've been working on for a long time, that the fact that it actually is getting released already seems implausible to me.
Yeah.
So we'll see. It will be the 24th of April, and it will be released, and yeah.
Well, I've heard some of the stuff from it. The singles are brilliant, so I'm excited for the whole thing.
Thank you. Me too. I'm excited for it to be out. It's nice to have something to proffer, even the skills that I have, which pale in comparison to the skills that we really need right now. But it's something. Yeah, it feels good to have an offering of some kind.
And I'm going to try and formulate this question well, because I was talking to a novelist this morning for this.
Nice.
A guy called Nikesh Shukla, who's brilliant, and we were talking about how I was asking him how he writes a novel in a sort of succinct way, which is obviously a difficult question to answer, but he answered it very well. And one of the things he said was that he thinks about what is the central question of the novel first, and what's the answer to that, and then thinks about who would be discussing that, and then what's happening to them. Yeah. So, if your forthcoming album was a novel, what's the central question of your album?
Wow.
You can take a moment to think about it, because it's a hard one.
Yeah. I wrote it between living in the Peak District and being on tour. And there's a common thread through both of those things, which is something that feels untamable. And that's, the wilds of tour and the wilds of the Peak District. To me, and I don't know what the question would be. That's a really good question. I'll have to get back to you.
Do you think it translates to albums? Because I'm still trying to work it out. I've just been having this rolling around my head since this morning, and I was wondering, because I like you were saying earlier, I like pulling things from other disciplines in and going, well, how does that apply to an album or what I'm doing? And some things work and some things don't. So when I'm writing an album, I come up with a name. The name just comes to me, and then I think of all the themes, all the things I'm interested in, and the ways I'm reflecting on my life and things at the moment. I don't know that I could answer that question, so I feel a little bit cheeky. I'm trying to make you do it as my guinea pig.
I guess it's, living, somewhere that I identified so strongly with in the north of England, and then travelling as widely as I did. There's the rub between feeling like an outsider and being an outsider, and so which would change and could exist simultaneously, it's being a tourist or feeling like a tourist. And I think it brought questions of identity and place and belonging to the forefront for me. And so again, I don't know what the question other than who are you person that's writing and releasing a self-titled debut album. I suppose who are you is the question. But you probably could apply that to any album, whether people wanted to or not.
But maybe people who wrote those albums hadn't thought about it so deeply as to what that sort of central question is, and I think it's an interesting exercise.
No, definitely.
Because I feel like some albums are here are the 10 songs we've finished.
Yeah.
And I just always want it to be more than that.
Yeah. No, this definitely isn't that, and I spent a lot of time working on it and not telling anybody that I was doing it because I wanted until it emerged with some kind of identity that was tangible to me, because I wanted it to be unadulterated somehow. I had that sort of anxiety of influence, that if I even let people know that I was working on it, that their impressions would taint it somehow. But once it was kind of once it was walking and talking, I could start introducing it.
I love that. Well, there's a book called Becoming a Writer by Dorothea Brand, which I read at university. I only went to university for a year,
you still
unfortunately. But I did go. I occasionally went, and I definitely read that book, and I've still got it. And it made a big impression on me because there was a bit in there about if you've got an idea for a story or a novel or what have you, don't tell someone that at a party. Don't keep telling that story, because then your brain thinks you've told the story and it can't write it anymore.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I think keeping secrets about, what your song's about or whether you're doing one at all is really, really smart, because then that energy is kept inside and you can actually use it to make the thing instead of, telling everyone about it. And then people are going, oh, so how's the album coming? And then you feel like shit because it's not done. And, there's all of that expectation.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Well, I'll speak to you again in 25 years. And now that I'm starting my new secret life.
I love the idea that this podcast will be running in 25 years. Thank you for your confidence.
Yeah, me too. Here's to us all in 25 years.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. So what 3 pieces of your own work would you recommend as a gateway for new listeners to get into your world?
Well, why don't you start with the song Nothing the Night Can't Change, which is it's everywhere that you would want to find something digitally, without promoting one individual digital platform. And then I was thinking about what would be nice to share now of something that I've been involved with. And when I got to play with Kurt Vile and Courtney Barnett as one of the Sea Lice, as one of their band, we did this crazy session where we got up at 8 a.m, which on tour time is 3 a.m, to go and play in Malibu. So we were setting up for this crazy Airbnb house that had belonged to Denzel Washington or someone insane previously, before it became a vacation home. And we were set up, with a view of the sea, and we could see dolphins playing as we were sound checking. And got to play with this most incredible group of musicians in a very beautiful setting, and they had drones flying around. And in terms of something that if I had to choose to sit and look at a piece of my own work right now, it's very visually soothing, and they're a brilliant bunch. So that was a Pitchfork session, I'm pretty sure, that was it was live at the time on Facebook, which I didn't realise until 10 minutes before. I was like, oh, it's live. Okay, great.
Better do it well then.
But it was it was it would be nice to be traveling around. Everybody would like to be traveling around right now. So a little bit of remote tourism could be possible if you watch that. And then a cause that would be great if anybody would like to support is a charity called Tiny Changes that was set up in honour of Scott Hutchison from Frightened Rabbit. And he was a friend of mine. I toured with them, opening for them with Larkin, and he'd asked me to be involved in a covers record that they were doing for the 10th anniversary of the Midnight Organ Fight. And he paired me up with Sarah Silverman, the comedian. And so we collaborated remotely on a cover of My Backwards Walk, a song of theirs that we both really loved, that we had both individually chosen. So it was a total blind date situation. And then after he passed, the record was then released, and the charity set up Tiny Changes, which benefits it's a mental health charity that focuses on young people in Scotland. So I would encourage people to get that record, because it's beautiful, incredible songwriting, and it's a good cause.
I'll put all of the links to this in the show notes so people can easily click and do things with those. Okay, so finally, thank you so much for your time, and I'd love to know what your next adventure is going to be.
Well, my next adventure, we founded Hand Mirror last year, which is it will be releasing my album as a record label, but it's also a platform for literary releases, and was going to be for live events, but that side of things is going to be on pause for now. So looking at ways that we as Hand Mirror could support ourselves and our creative community whilst we can't gather together physically. I'm not sure when this will be broadcast, but on the 6th of April we will be announcing the Hand Mirror Patreon, which gives people the opportunity to be involved in supporting us and helping us in turn to support others. Because the impetus for us starting Hand Mirror hasn't changed. It was that if we can find a way to support ourselves creatively, then we should in turn use that as a way to invite other people and offer them platform and help, any help that we're able to. So that's been a big focus. Apart from I haven't had tours to be doing, it's thinking, well, what do I actually want to do? And it is, to continue to connect with other creative people and find a way that we can try and support each other right now.
What a lovely way to end a really brilliant conversation. Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you.
And you. And all the best.
Well, I hope that conversation put you in the mood for checking out some of Katie's music, because I've made a special webpage with links to her solo album, collaborations and music recommendations, plus links to everything else we discussed. So visit penfriend.rocks/Harkin for that. That's penfriend.rocks/HARKIN. And while you're there, please check out some of my earlier episodes, conversations with Tanya Donnelly, Mark Chadwick, Aisha Hassan, Frank Turner, Charlotte Hatherley, Tom Robinson and Beck Hill. Massive thanks to Katie Harkin for joining that list. Hooray! Oh yeah, and I've been listening to podcasts while running in the past few weeks, and I now have the evidence to prove that they make me run faster, so you're welcome? Wherever you're listening from, thank you so much. If you haven't already subscribed to Attention Engineer, please click that button. I have so many more great guests on the way and would love to share them with you. Make sure you tune in next week for my conversation with author Nikesh Shukla. Chat to you soon.